It's safe to say that 2024 hasn't been the best year for Blackpool Pleasure Beach, as it has seen the closure of 3 major attractions. The closure of the Grand Prix is all well and good, as the park are supposedly planning a new attraction to replace it. Hopefully that is going to be a roller coaster. However, we've also seen the closure of Ice Blast and River Caves, and we have no idea what the future holds for either of those 2 attractions. Are they going to be repaired and reopened for the public to enjoy once again, or are they going to be closed and replaced, or not? With no major work having taken place on either of these attractions since their initial closures, it's really hard to tell, so I thought I'd make a little speculation video sharing my thoughts on what the future could hold for these classic rides. Quick disclaimer before we get started, I just want to clarify that although I'm a very regular visitor of Blackpool Pleasure Beach, I have no insider knowledge of what is going on with either of these attractions, and why would I want or need to know that sort of information? I'm all for confidentiality, and what's meant to be private should stay private. It's been very clear over the past couple of years that Ice Blast has been coming to the end of its service life. It's had plenty of downtime. I'm pretty sure that I've been on the ride before when it's failed to launch up the tower, with the ride obviously being an S&S shot tower. Therefore, it was no surprise at all to me on opening day when Amanda Thompson released a tweet stating that Ice Blast, or as she calls it, the PlayStation, which it hasn't been called for about 20 years, is not going to be operating, as they've been having some issues with it and needs some parts to replace it, which they're in the process of ordering. However, 3.5 months down the line and the ride is still sitting there, abandoned. There's been very little work that's taken place on it whatsoever, besides the movement of a couple of fences. Certainly no work in terms of replacing any parts, and that's caused some fans of the park to get quite angry, making comments such as that Pleasure Beach are lying and that they're not ordering new parts. And I can see where they're coming from, because S&S is a manufacturer that's still alive and well, so you wouldn't think it would take them 3.5 months to order parts and get them delivered. So I guess it does boil down to that the park are either lying, or the situation has changed, meaning that they've decided against ordering new parts for the ride. And personally, I believe that the latter is probably the case, because despite whether they may or may not have lied about anything in the past, I don't see why the park would lie in this case, because the thread that Amanda Thompson addressed Ice Blast in was the same thread in which she addressed the permanent closure of the Grand Prix. Therefore, you would think that if it was known that Ice Blast would be closing permanently at that point as well, she'd just mention it alongside the Grand Prix and say that the Grand Prix and Ice Blast will no longer be operating at the park. Therefore, my theory is that the park's original intentions were to get some new parts for Ice Blast to repair it and prolong its lifespan, but something's come up during that process. Maybe this project is higher budget than they originally anticipated, and therefore they've deemed that it's probably not worth going ahead with, and therefore they're going to be demolishing Ice Blast maybe at the end of this year when they can get some cranes in to do so when the park's not operating, and hopefully put a brand new flat ride in its place. The case of River Caves is one that I'm a bit more uncertain about. The ride actually opens on the first weekend of the 2024 season and was operating normally, albeit in a bit of a state. There was a snake animatronic towards the end of the ride that was broken and had its mechanism hanging out. And then next thing we know, the following weekend, the ride is just closed and looks completely abandoned. There's no water in the trough. There's netting over the entrance and exit, I believe, to stop any seagulls from getting in there. This suggests to me that the park have encountered an unexpected issue with the ride, and it must be something pretty major for it to have been closed this long. And that's what the rumours also suggest from enthusiasts. Maybe the ridiculous rumours, who knows. But with that in mind alone, I don't think the park's plan is to close this ride permanently. Furthermore, it is a very, very old classic ride for them that is very popular as well. It opened way back in 1905, so for them to close this ride for good would be absolutely devastating. Not to mention that it would be very difficult to replace with something new due to its location within a building in the centre of the park that is used to house 2 other attractions those being the Ghost Train out the front and Wallace and Gromit round the back and above. Fun fact, before Wallace and Gromit came to the park in 2013, it used to be known as the Gold Mine. It still had the same track layout, but it actually interacted with the river caves. It would go over the top of the section just before you enter the Valley of the Kings scene. But as part of the retheme of the Gold Mine into Wallace and Gromit, they actually covered up that part of the river caves. Therefore, the interaction was lost, and it would look a bit weird if it was like that now, because you'd be going through river caves and you just see a random scene from Wallace and Gromit. But all we can hope for is that movement does begin to take place soon, and thankfully that is the case with Grand Prix, and therefore you definitely want to go and check out this video on the right side of your screen, in which I cover the initial demolition of that ride. And for more things theme park related in the UK and beyond, make sure you click the icon in the centre of your screen to subscribe.